Currently, there's not a universal definition of what net zero actually means. So what I did is I spent some time trolling through the net to try and find some examples that the great and the good have used to define net zero. If you want to know the conclusions of that and what I think a definition of net zero should be for your business, stay tuned. We've all heard the terms net zero and carbon neutrality when companies claim to be net zero or claim to be carbon neutral, but what does that actually mean in reality? What I've done here is I've gone out to a number of people and looked at their definition of it. Once I've had a look at those, I'll run through those with you, then I'll talk about what I think the definition should be, okay? So first off, the national grid. Okay, they say net zero means achieving a balance between the greenhouse gases put into the atmosphere and those taken out. So in equals out. Okay. DEFRA say that net zero means any emissions are balanced by absorbing an equivalent amount from the atmosphere. What goes in goes out. Okay. The BBC, bless them, great institution. Net zero means not adding to the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Okay, so you've got three good organisations there, DEFRA, BBC, National Grid, and they're all saying the same thing, carbon in, carbon out. They all mean that you can offset, so that if you, for example, emit, I had a client come across my desk yesterday, 63 tonnes of carbon dioxide, okay? It means you can buy an offset, so you can invest in someone who's doing forestry, or providing solar ovens, or in big dam in India, big hydro dams where the offsets are really, really cheap. You can just buy your way out. So you don't have to, according to these definitions, you don't have to do anything. All you do is you carry on business as normal, but you buy an offset to cover your carbon emissions. So what does that mean? Your National Grid, DEFRA, BBC. What they're all saying is carry on, business as normal, just pay £1,000. Then you get to be claimed to be your net zero and you're greener than green. Obviously, that is not what I like, isn't it? It's got some problems. I mean, it's not what we're all trying to do. So I prefer instead the definitions of the United Nations, which says net zero means cutting greenhouse gases to as close to zero as possible, then offsetting the remainder. That's brilliant. Notice they're cutting it first, then offsetting. Oxford University is to reduce greenhouse gases and or ensure that any ongoing emissions are balanced by removals. Quite good, but it doesn't, you just reduce it a bit, you meet Oxford University's definition. My favourite of all of those is the definition given by the Science Based Targets Initiative. And it's quite wordy, it's kind of this bottom section here that we can see that, but it's a good couple of paragraphs. What they say is you should do two things. You should reduce your emissions down to the level where the whole planet won't warm up by more than 1.5 degrees. That's quite easy to, well, I say easy, it's difficult, but the scientists tell you what that number is each year. And second, whatever's left, once you've reduced it down as much as you possibly can, and in line with the 1.5 degree target, then you offset. Okay, and why I like the science-based targets ones, it gives you something to aim at, okay? And that's what I think we should adopt as a generalized definition of net zero. Reduce your targets down to as much as possible, then offset, okay? Because you're always going to have some emissions, you will need to do some of them. So that's kind of clearing it all up. The problem is right now, there is no definition of net zero. It's not formal. I've got 6 or 7 written down here, and as you say, they vary a lot. So if you need a working definition, reduce down as much as possible, offset what you can't reduce any further. Okay. Now I thought I'd sort of throw in another one for you, which is what's the difference between net zero and the other term, carbon neutral and carbon neutrality? Again, I've trolled through probably about 15, 20 definitions by the great and the good. And do you know what? They vary a lot, and they are pretty much synonymous with what we've said about net zero. So if you're confused about it, what I can say is that carbon neutrality, carbon neutral, net zero, completely interchangeable in the real world, okay? I wish there were a better definition that was approved by someone high up, but day to day, they're completely synonymous, okay? And it's a bit messy, I'll be straight with you. So there you go. I hope that was useful to you. I hope that sort of clarified it. Net zero, reduce as much as possible, then offset the rest. Okay. If you've got any other questions to do with reducing your carbon, complying with the various standards out there, how you can lower your carbon use within your company, let me know. Always happy to hear from you. Ping me a question, either email it, put as a comment to the video, put it on the web chat, whatever, and I'll do my best to help. Okay, hope that was useful. See you next time.